I need to tell you something before you decide whether I'm the good guy here. When the doctor said my daughter might not make it through the night, my first thought wasn't prayer. It was timing. I was standing beside her hospital bed in Boston, the kind of room that hums even when everyone's quiet. Fluorescent lights, a heart monitor clicking like it was counting something down, my hand wrapped around Tess's fingers, cold and lighter than they should have been. The machine was breathing for her, and all I could think was, if her husband doesn't answer his phone right now, I can legally ruin him. That's not a thought a father is supposed to have, but at 68, you stop pretending you're someone you're not. You don't become dangerous when you're angry. You become dangerous when you're calm. Her husband, Grant Halstead, was supposed to be there. He promised me, hand on my shoulder, eyes steady, that he would never leave her alone again. Said it outside a church in Connecticut after a fundraiser dinner where he drank expensive wine and talked about expansion plans like life was a spreadsheet. Instead, Grant was somewhere warm. I know because I watched it happen. I stepped out into the hallway, pulled my phone from my coat pocket and opened Instagram, something my daughter once showed me how to use, laughing when I tapped the wrong icon. Grant's story was live. A yacht, white deck, ocean glowing orange under the setting sun, music loud enough to leak through my phone speaker, a woman filming him, her nails resting on his chest like she belonged there. Champagne sprayed. Grant laughed. I checked the timestamp. Posted 8 minutes ago. Back inside the room, Tess's heart monitor skipped once. Just a hiccup. Enough to make my breath catch. That's when I did something you might not forgive me for. I didn't call him. I waited. Because if he chose that yacht over his wife one more time, I needed to know. Not for revenge, for permission to myself. Stay with me. This matters. If this were happening to you, wouldn't you want to know who you're really dealing with? Subscribe now. You'll want the warning. I've lived a quiet life. After my wife passed, I moved slower, volunteered at the community center, grew tomatoes behind the church, mornings with coffee, evenings with the news muted. I learned to be small because small keeps the peace. But I wasn't always like that, and Grant never understood that. I tried calling him once, let it ring twice, hung up before voicemail. Then I watched the rest of the story. Another woman, different angle, same yacht, her laugh sharper. She tagged herself. Curiosity isn't weakness, it's a tool. I tapped her profile, public, scroll, hotel balconies, designer bags, Miami nights, and there, buried between brunch photos, Grant's comments, smiling emojis, inside jokes, going back months. This wasn't a mistake. This was a pattern. I went back into the room, sat down, held my daughter's hand again. "Tess," I whispered, "I'm here." Her eyelids fluttered, but she didn't wake. The nurse checked her vitals and avoided my eyes. That's when I knew something was wrong that hadn't been said out loud yet. I asked one simple question. How long was she alone? The nurse hesitated. "Several hours," she said. "A neighbor heard the dog." Not her husband, a neighbor. Have you ever realized all at once that the person you trusted most didn't even try? Tell me in the comments. I read them. I stepped into the hallway again. This time I didn't open Instagram. I opened my contacts. There was a name I hadn't touched in years. Marla Keene. We go back a long way. She's the kind of attorney who doesn't raise her voice because she doesn't need to. I once promised myself I'd never call her again, not unless I was ready to cross a line I couldn't uncross. I stared at the screen. Back inside the room, the machine kept breathing. I pressed call. Marla answered on the first ring. "Hal?" I said. "I was wondering when you'd finally need me again. I need to freeze everything right now." Silence. Then, "Is she alive?" "Barely." Another pause. "Do you still have medical and financial proxy?" "Yes." "Good," she said, "because Grant Halstead just handed you a loaded weapon." That was the moment the balance shifted. Not because I was smarter, not because I was angrier, because Grant believed charm was protection, and charm doesn't hold up in court. Let me ask you something honestly. If someone left your child to die because they were busy celebrating, would you walk away? Stay with me. The next 60 minutes change everything. Marla moved fast, faster than I expected, faster than Grant could imagine. Credit access flagged, account permissions reviewed, emergency clauses activated, all while Grant laughed under a Miami sunset. Back in the ICU, Tessa stirred, just once. Her eyelids fluttered enough to see me. "Dad," she whispered, "I'm here." Her fingers tightened weakly around mine. "He knows," she breathed. My chest went cold. "Who knows?" "Grant," she breathed. "He planned it." Then her eyes closed again. That was the moment this stopped being about betrayal and became something else entirely. If you think this is where most people would panic, you're right. But panic wastes time, and time was something Grant no longer had. Subscribe, because the next chapter isn't about revenge, it's about containment. Before I tell you what I did next, you need to understand something about me. I wasn't always this calm. People see the gray hair, the slow walk, the volunteering at the community center in Connecticut, and they assume I've spent my life avoiding conflict, gardening on Sundays, folding chairs after church, quiet dinners with the television turned low. That's the version that survived. The other version learned early that power doesn't announce itself. It waits, it documents, it remembers. Grant Halstead never bothered to learn the difference. When Tessa met him, she was living in Cambridge, fresh out of a job that drained the color from her face. Grant arrived like a solution. Nice suit, soft voice, the kind of man who shakes your hand with both palms and looks you in the eye just long enough to feel sincere. I noticed the details he didn't. How he answered questions with stories. How he smiled when numbers came up. How he spoke about people like assets that just hadn't realized their value yet. At dinner one night, years ago now, he leaned back in his chair and said, "I like efficiency. Feelings complicate things." Tessa laughed it off. I didn't. Have you ever heard a sentence and felt something close in your chest? Drop a comment if you know that feeling. I warned her once, just once, not because I didn't have more to say, but because warnings only work when they're rare. I told her, men who treat life like a transaction always collect later. She asked me to trust her judgment, so I did. That's on me. Grant moved fast after the wedding, faster than comfort allows. New house in Greenwich, renovations no one asked for, conversations about restructuring finances. He framed everything as protection, optimization, long-term planning. Then came the paperwork, a postnuptial agreement. He said it was standard, said it would simplify things if the market turned. I remember Tessa calling me late that night, voice tight, asking if she was being dramatic. I told her to read every line. She did, and she signed anyway, because love convinces smart people to ignore alarms. Back in the ICU hallway, with Marla Keene already pulling threads, those memories started lining up, not as regret is useless, but as confirmation. Grant hadn't changed. He'd revealed himself slowly. Marla called back 10 minutes later. "I need you to listen," she said, "and I need you to do exactly what I say." I stepped into an empty stairwell, cold concrete, smell of disinfectant and dust. Grant structured everything to look like his, but the spine of it, the assets that actually matter, sit under Tessa's name. Trusts, premarital holdings, inheritance he can't touch without authorization. I closed my eyes. "Which I have," I said. "Yes," Marla replied. "For now." For now. Those two words matter, because power that expires makes people reckless. I went back into Tessa's room, sat beside her again. The machine kept its rhythm. The nurse suggested a line and left without speaking. I held my daughter's hand and made myself a promise. I wouldn't let emotion rush this. That's how mistakes happen. If this story makes you uncomfortable, good. Subscribe now. The next choice gets worse. Grant finally called. Not me. The hospital. Reception transferred him through. His voice came through the speaker too bright, too casual. "Hey, this is Grant Halstead. I'm returning a missed call about my wife." I took the phone from the nurse before she could answer. "Where are you?" I asked. A pause. "Traveling?" he said. "I'll be back soon." "Soon isn't a place," I replied. Another pause, longer this time. "I'm in Miami. Business." I looked at Tessa, at the machine breathing for her. "You should have been here," I said. Silence. Then Grant exhaled, slow, annoyed. "Let's not do this right now. I'm handling a lot." That's when I knew. He wasn't panicking. He thought he still had control. Control is a dangerous delusion. I ended the call. Didn't yell, didn't threaten, didn't explain, because explanations teach people how to defend themselves. Grant texted me minutes later. "I'll take care of everything when I land." I didn't reply. Instead, I sent Marla a single word: proceed. If you're wondering whether that was too far, ask yourself this: would you protect someone who already chose not to protect your child? The first domino fell quietly. Grant's primary card declined at a marina restaurant, then another. He laughed it off, tried a third. The server's smile stiffened. He didn't know yet. That's the worst moment for someone like him, the space between confidence and awareness. Back at the hospital, a different doctor stepped into the room. New badge, new expression. "Mr. Mercer, there's something in your daughter's chart we need to discuss." Not her condition, her history. The air felt heavier. Stay with me, because this is where the story stops being about cheating and starts being about intent. The doctor didn't sit down. That's how I knew whatever she was about to say wouldn't fit into a sentence I could ignore. She stood at the foot of the bed, hands folded, eyes steady in that way people get when they've already decided how much truth you can handle. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "this isn't about your daughter's current condition. It's about what led up to it." The room felt smaller. The hum of the machine grew louder. Or maybe I was just listening harder. She continued. "There are inconsistencies in her recent medical history, missed follow-ups, medication changes that weren't authorized by her primary physician." I looked down at Tessa. Her breathing rose and fell, borrowed time measured by wires and screens. "Who authorized them?" I asked. The doctor hesitated, just long enough. "Her husband submitted the requests, digitally." There it was. Not proof, not yet, but direction. Have you ever felt your stomach drop before your mind catches up? If you have, stay with me. I asked the doctor to give me copies of everything, not summaries, not interpretations. Everything. She nodded. Professionals recognize other professionals when they see them, and despite the gray hair and the volunteer badge clipped to my coat, I knew how to ask questions that don't invite resistance. Back in the hallway, I called Marla again. Her tone changed the moment I explained. This just escalated, from civil to potentially criminal. "Good," I replied. "Then we're no longer negotiating." I leaned against the wall and let memory do what it does best. Because here's the part Grant never understood. I keep records, not because I'm paranoid, because once, a long time ago, I trusted the wrong person, and someone paid for it. That's when I promised myself never again. Years back, when Tessa first married Grant, she asked me to help organize their finances. Nothing official, just advice. I'd run a small consultancy before retirement. Old habits stick. Grant waved it off, said he had it covered. But Tessa, quietly, sent me copies anyway. Emails, documents, access logs, a folder labeled "just in case." At the time, I thought it was fear. Now I knew it was instinct. I opened that folder from my phone, standing outside an ICU room that smelled like antiseptic and truth. What I found wasn't dramatic. No smoking gun, no villain monologue, just patterns. Time-stamped approvals, expense reimbursements tied to travel dates, medical portal logins from locations that didn't match her phone data, and one thing that made my jaw tighten. Grant had added himself as an emergency delegate on her health account without telling her. If this sounds small, understand something. Small permissions unlock big doors. Subscribe. This detail saves lives. I sent the files to Marla. She responded with 3 words. This is enough. Across the country, Grant was starting to feel it. The marina called him back. Polite voice, firm tone. Account verification required. His bank app asked him to re-authenticate, then asked again, then locked him out. He laughed at first, that kind of laugh people use when they think inconvenience is temporary. Confidence collapses quietly. Grant texted me, "What did you do?" I didn't answer. Not yet. Because power isn't just action, it's restraint. Have you ever wanted to respond immediately, then realized silence hurts more? Tell me in the comments. Back in the ICU, a nurse adjusted Tessa's IV and whispered, "She's stable. For now." For now again. Time keeps score even when we pretend it doesn't. Marla called. "We're filing an emergency injunction, asset freeze, medical oversight transfer. If he tries to intervene now, it flags every system." "Do it," I said. "And how? There's something else." I waited. "He's already tried to move money, offshore." I smiled, not because it was funny, because it was predictable. Grant didn't think he was escaping. He thought he was getting ahead. That's how people reveal intent. I finally replied to his text, "We'll talk when you land." That was the most generous thing I'd done for him all night. The response came instantly. "You're overreacting." There it was. The sentence men use when they realize someone else holds the leverage. Overreacting. As if my daughter was lying unconscious while he toasted strangers. I stepped back into the room and sat with Tessa again, held her hand, counted breaths. "I'm not angry," I told her softly. "I'm focused." Her fingers twitched, just a little, enough to remind me what this was really about. If you're watching this and thinking you'd already be screaming, understand something. Screaming alerts predators. Quiet corners them. Marla sent one last message that night. He can't touch anything now, and if he tries, it gets worse. I looked at the phone, then at my daughter, then at the door, because Grant Halstead was about to learn something most people never do until it's too late. The truth doesn't need permission to surface, and I wasn't done digging. Stay with me. The next chapter is where Grant tries to regain control and makes the mistake that seals his fate. Grant Halstead landed in Miami International just after sunrise. I know because Marla texted me the moment his phone pinged a domestic tower. She didn't need to say anything else. The timing told the story. People like Grant don't fly home in shame. They fly home to fix things. I was sitting in a plastic chair outside the ICU, nursing a coffee that had gone cold an hour earlier. The hallway was quiet in that early morning way hospitals get. Too quiet, like everyone's holding their breath at once. My phone rang. Grant's name lit up the screen. I didn't answer. Not immediately. Silence unsettles men who are used to being heard. I let it ring out, watched the screen go dark, waited 30 seconds. Then it rang again. I stepped into the stairwell before answering. Concrete walls, echoed footsteps, a place where voices don't travel far. "Hall," Grant said, forcing warmth into his tone. "We need to talk." "About what?" I asked. Another pause. "You know what," he said. "There's been a misunderstanding." Misunderstanding. That word again. Men like Grant love words that soften reality. "There's no misunderstanding," I said. "There's an absence. You weren't here." "I had commitments," he replied. "Things you wouldn't understand." I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. This was the moment. The one where he still believed persuasion would work. "Grant," I said slowly, "do you know how long she was alone?" He didn't answer. "I asked you a question." "I don't see how that's relevant right now," he said. "What is relevant is that you've interfered with my accounts." There it was. Not her condition, not her pain, his money. Have you ever heard someone reveal themselves in a single sentence? Drop a comment if you caught it. You should stop, Grant continued. This is spiraling. You're emotional. I smiled. Emotional is what people call you when they realize logic isn't on their side. I'm very calm, I said, and this isn't spiraling, it's stabilizing. He laughed, a short, sharp sound. You think you're in control? He asked. You don't even know half of what you're touching. That was his mistake. Grant assumed I was reacting. He didn't realize I'd been preparing. If you say so, I replied. You should come to the hospital. I will, after I handle a few things. Of course, I said. I ended the call. If you're wondering why I didn't confront him then, ask yourself this. Would you argue with someone who's already falling? Subscribe. The next move happens quietly. 10 minutes later, Marla called. He's panicking, she said. Tried to override the freeze through a private banker. That triggered a compliance review. What does that mean? I asked. It means people are asking questions he can't answer. Good. Back in the ICU, Tessa's breathing had evened out. The nurse gave me a look I couldn't read. Hope, maybe, or caution. I stayed seated, still, present. That's when Grant finally showed up. Not at her bedside, at the front desk. I watched from down the hall as he argued with a receptionist half his age, voice low but tight. He gestured too much, smiled at the wrong moments. Control slipping. He spotted me and straightened his jacket like posture could restore authority. Hall, he said, approaching. We should talk privately. We are, I said. He glanced toward Tessa's room. How is she? I waited, let the silence stretch. Alive, I said. So far. He flinched. Just a flicker. Enough. We'll figure this out, he said. I've already called my lawyer. So have I replied. That surprised him. Men like Grant assume age equals irrelevance. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. You don't know what you're dealing with. I leaned closer, lowered my voice. You left my daughter alone. Whatever I'm dealing with now, you earned. His phone buzzed. He glanced down, then again. His jaw tightened. He stepped away, answered it, turned his back. I didn't need to hear the words. His posture said enough. Something had broken through the illusion. He hung up and looked at me differently now, not confident, calculating. What did you file? He asked. Protection, I said. For who? For everyone who didn't get a choice. Grant exhaled sharply. You think you're clean? He asked. You think this won't come back on you? I met his eyes. I've already lived with the worst outcome. Everything else is manageable. That scared him. You could see it. Because men like Grant survive by assuming everyone has something to lose. He didn't understand what it meant to already have lost enough. A nurse stepped between us. Mr. Halstead, you're not authorized to see the patient at this time. Grant turned to me. You did this, he said. I didn't deny it. His phone buzzed again. This time, his face drained of color. If you've ever watched confidence evaporate in real time, you know the look. Grant, I said, you should sit down. He didn't. He just stared at the screen and whispered, this isn't possible. But it was, and it was only the beginning. Stay with me, because the next chapter is where Grant tries one last move and crosses a line he can't come back from. Grant didn't sit down, even when I told him to. Even when his hands started to shake. He stood there in the hospital hallway staring at his phone like it had betrayed him, thumb hovering over the screen, refreshing an app that wasn't going to open again. His jaw worked back and forth as if chewing on a thought that didn't taste right. That's when I knew what kind of man he was. Men who panic, apologize. Men who scheme, look for leverage. Grant did neither. He looked up at me and said, we need to reset this conversation. Reset, as if life had a button for that. What do you want? I asked. He glanced toward Tessa's room again, this time longer, calculating. "I want access," he said. "I'm her husband." "No," I replied. "You're a risk." That word landed harder than any insult. Grant leaned closer, lowered his voice. "You freeze my assets, you humiliate me, you turn my life upside down, and you think I won't respond?" There it was. Not remorse, a threat. Have you ever watched someone tell you exactly who they are without realizing it? Stay with me. I didn't answer him. Instead, I turned and walked back into Tessa's room, sat beside her, took her hand. Grant followed. Bad move. The nurse stepped in immediately. "Sir, you can't—" "I'm her husband," Grant snapped. "This is ridiculous." The nurse looked at me. I nodded once. She called security. Grant's face hardened. That's when he crossed the line. "You know, if she dies, you won't have a say anymore." The room went quiet. Even the machine seemed to hesitate. That sentence wasn't panic, it was strategy. My chest tightened, not with rage, but with recognition. I'd heard that tone before, years ago. A different man, a different mistake. Grant had just revealed his endgame. I stood slowly. "Say that again," I said. He didn't. Instead, he smiled, just barely. "You think you're protecting her, but you're just delaying the inevitable." Security arrived. 2 guards, calm, professional. "Sir, you'll need to step out." Grant didn't resist, didn't argue. As they escorted him away, he looked back at me and mouthed something I didn't like. "You'll regret this." If you think that sentence would scare me, you don't know what regret looks like. Subscribe. This story turns darker. Minutes later, Marla called. "You need to listen carefully," she said. "We just intercepted something." I stepped into the stairwell again. "He filed an emergency motion challenging your proxy, claiming you're mentally unfit to make decisions." I laughed once. "On what grounds?" "He submitted an affidavit saying you're unstable, vindictive, acting out of grief." I closed my eyes. There it was. Grant wasn't trying to win. He was trying to remove me. "Can he do that?" I asked. "She can try, but here's the problem for him." I waited. "And he used hospital timestamps and account activity to build his case." And those timestamps place him in Miami when he claims he was coordinating care. The room felt suddenly very still. "Meaning," Marla said, "he just submitted false statements to a judge." That wasn't just desperation, that was self-destruction. Have you ever watched someone dig faster when the ground gives way? Tell me if you've seen it. Back in the ICU, Tessa stirred again. Her breathing changed, subtle, but different. The doctor returned, same one from before. "We've stabilized her for now, but there's something else." I nodded. "The medication changes. They weren't just unauthorized, they were contraindicated." I swallowed. Meaning someone with access altered her regimen in a way that increased risk. I didn't ask who. We both knew. The doctor lowered her voice. "We're documenting everything." Good, because documentation outlives lies. Grant was no longer a bad husband, he was a liability. I checked my phone, a message from Grant. "If you push this further, you'll force my hand." I showed it to Marla. Her response came immediately. He already did. That was the moment my decision solidified. Not revenge, containment. Protection isn't gentle when the threat is intentional. I typed one final message to Grant. "Do not contact me again. Any further communication goes through counsel." He replied with a single word, "Coward." I didn't respond, because cowards bluff. Men who plan harm reveal themselves, and Grant had just done both. Stay with me. The next chapter is where the court gets involved, and Grant realizes he didn't just lose control, he handed over evidence. Courts don't move fast. Anyone who's ever trusted one to save them learns that lesson early. But when hospitals, judges, and documentation collide, things accelerate. The emergency hearing was scheduled for 8:30 a.m. the next morning. Grant requested it. That still makes me smile. He thought urgency favored him, thought the judge would see a grieving old man lashing out and restore order. Men like Grant mistake age for weakness. I arrived early. Same suit I wore to my wife's funeral, same one I wore the last time someone tried to outmaneuver me and failed. Marla met me outside the courtroom. No small talk, just a thin folder and a look that told me everything. "He walked himself into this," she said. Grant arrived 10 minutes late, not rushing, not apologetic, confident. He nodded at people like he belonged there, like the room owed him something. That confidence cracked the moment he saw who was sitting behind Marla, the hospital administrator, the attending physician, and a woman Grant had never seen before, the court-appointed patient advocate. Have you ever watched someone realize the room has changed sides? Stay with me. The judge didn't waste time. "Mr. Halstead," she said, "you filed an emergency petition claiming your father-in-law is unfit to act as proxy." Grant stood. "Yes, Your Honor, he's acting emotionally, blocking access, interfering with medical decisions." The judge turned to Marla. Response? Marla stood calmly. "We agree emotions are high," she said, "which is precisely why we brought evidence." She handed the clerk the first packet. Medical logs, access timestamps, travel confirmations. Marla spoke slowly, not for drama, for precision. "Mr. Halstead submitted medication changes remotely while physically located in Miami. These changes directly contradicted medical advice." Grant shook his head. "That's not—" "Sit," the judge said. He did. The next packet landed. Financial records, attempted transfers, emergency freeze triggers. These actions occurred within minutes of learning his wife was hospitalized, not to support her care, but to secure assets. Grant looked at me then, really looked. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about exposure. The judge turned to the physician. "Doctor," she asked, "do these medication changes increase risk?" "Yes," the doctor said, "significantly." Silence filled the room. Then the judge said the sentence that ended Grant's authority. "Mr. Halstead, effective immediately, you are suspended from all medical decision-making privileges regarding your wife." Grant stood again. "You can't do that," he said. "I'm her husband." The judge met his eyes. "You were," she said. "That status doesn't override patient safety." Have you ever watched a title disappear in real time? Comment if you caught that moment. The court recessed briefly. Grant approached me as Marla gathered papers. "You planned this," he said quietly. "You baited me." I leaned in just enough. "No," I said. "You exposed yourself." He laughed, a brittle sound. "You think this ends here?" he asked. "I still have options." "Not anymore," I replied, because during the recess, something else happened. Marla's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, then at me. "They've opened a criminal inquiry, not charges yet." Grant heard that, his face drained. The judge returned. "The proxy remains with Mr. Mercer, and due to concerns raised, I'm authorizing an external review of prior medical authorizations." Grant sat down slowly. The hearing was over, but the consequences were just beginning. Outside the courtroom, Grant finally lost control. "This isn't over," he hissed. "You think you're untouchable?" I turned to him. "I don't need to be," I said. "I just need to be right." He stormed off. Marla exhaled. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm focused," I said. Back at the hospital, Tessa looked calmer, the machine steadier. The doctor allowed herself a small smile. "Whatever you did," she said, "it helped." I sat with my daughter again, held her hand, talked to her about nothing. The garden behind the church, the tomatoes she used to tease me about. If you're watching this and thinking justice finally showed up, subscribe. The hardest part hasn't happened yet. Because Grant Halstead wasn't done. Men like him don't accept loss. They escalate. And somewhere between that courtroom and the hospital parking lot, Grant made a decision. one that would end whatever sympathy anyone still had for him. Courts don't move fast. Anyone who's ever trusted one to save them learns that lesson early. But when hospitals, judges, and documentation collide, things accelerate. The emergency hearing was scheduled for 8:30 a.m. the next morning. Grant requested it. That still makes me smile. He thought urgency favored him, thought the judge would see a grieving old man lashing out and restore order. Men like Grant mistake age for weakness. I arrived early. Same suit I wore to my wife's funeral. Same one I wore the last time someone tried to outmaneuver me and failed. Marla met me outside the courtroom. No small talk, just a thin folder and a look that told me everything. He walked himself into this, she said. Grant arrived 10 minutes late. Not rushing, not apologetic, confident. He nodded at people like he belonged there, like the room owed him something. That confidence cracked the moment he saw who was sitting behind Marla. The hospital administrator, the attending physician, and a woman Grant had never seen before. The court-appointed patient advocate. Have you ever watched someone realize the room has changed sides? Stay with me. The judge didn't waste time. "Mr. Halstead," she said, "you filed an emergency petition claiming your father-in-law is unfit to act as proxy." Grant stood. "Yes, Your Honor. He's acting emotionally, blocking access, interfering with medical decisions." The judge turned to Marla. Response? Marla stood calmly. "We agree emotions are high," she said, "which is precisely why we brought evidence." She handed the clerk the first packet. Medical logs, access timestamps, travel confirmations. Marla spoke slowly, not for drama, for precision. Mr. Halstead submitted medication changes remotely while physically located in Miami. These changes directly contradicted medical advice. Grant shook his head. "That's not..." "Sit," the judge said. He did. The next packet landed. Financial records, attempted transfers, emergency freeze triggers. These actions occurred within minutes of learning his wife was hospitalized, not to support her care, but to secure assets. Grant looked at me then, really looked. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about exposure. The judge turned to the physician. "Doctor," she asked, "do these medication changes increase risk?" "Yes," the doctor said, "significantly." Silence filled the room. Then the judge said the sentence that ended Grant's authority. "Mr. Halstead, effective immediately, you are suspended from all medical decision-making privileges regarding your wife." Grant stood again. "You can't do that," he said. "I'm her husband." The judge met his eyes. "You were," she said. "That status doesn't override patient safety." Have you ever watched a title disappear in real time? Comment if you caught that moment. The court recessed briefly. Grant approached me as Marla gathered papers. "You planned this," he said quietly. "You baited me." I leaned in just enough. "No," I said. "You exposed yourself." He laughed, a brittle sound. "You think this ends here?" he asked. "I still have options." "Not anymore," I replied, because during the recess, something else happened. Marla's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, then at me. "They've opened a criminal inquiry," she said. "Not charges, yet." Grant heard that. His face drained. The judge returned. "The proxy remains with Mr. Mercer, and due to concerns raised, I'm authorizing an external review of prior medical authorizations." Grant sat down slowly. The hearing was over, but the consequences were just beginning. Outside the courtroom, Grant finally lost control. "This isn't over," he hissed. "You think you're untouchable?" I turned to him. "I don't need to be," I said. "I just need to be right." He stormed off. Marla exhaled. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm focused," I said. Back at the hospital, Tessa looked calmer, the machine steadier. The doctor allowed herself a small smile. "Whatever you did, it helped." I sat with my daughter again, held her hand, talked to her about nothing. The garden behind the church, the tomatoes she used to tease me about. If you're watching this and thinking justice finally showed up, subscribe. The hardest part hasn't happened yet. Because Grant Halstead wasn't done. Men like him don't accept loss. They escalate. And somewhere between that courtroom and the hospital parking lot, Grant made a decision. One that would end whatever sympathy anyone still had for him. Stay with me. Tessa woke up just before dawn. Not the confused stirring from before, not the half-conscious drifting that makes doctors speak in maybes. This time, she woke up clear. Her eyes focused, her breathing steady, her voice soft but present. "Dad," she said, "we need to talk, before he does." I pulled my chair closer to the bed and sat down. The machines hummed, quieter now, like they'd done their job and were willing to step back. "Take your time," I said. She shook her head. "I don't have much," she replied, "and you need to know why this happened." I didn't interrupt. That's how you hear the truth. "He was changing my medications," she said. "Not all at once, small adjustments. He said it was advice from a consultant, that it would help me sleep, help my anxiety." My jaw tightened. "I questioned it," she continued, "more than once, and every time I did, he told me I was unstable, that stress was the real problem." Gaslighting has a sound. It's calm, reasonable, familiar. "He told me if I pushed back," she whispered, "he'd have me declared unfit. He already had drafts prepared." That was it, the final piece. Grant hadn't just abandoned her, he'd been preparing to replace her. Have you ever realized too late that someone was planning your erasure? If that chills you, subscribe. This happens more than you think. Tessa closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again. "I sent you the folder, the just-in-case one. I hoped you'd never need it." I squeezed her hand. "You did the right thing," I said. Later that morning, Marla arrived with the hospital's legal counsel and a representative from the district attorney's office. They didn't sit with ceremony. They sat with purpose. Grant's emergency motion had triggered a review of everything, his offshore attempts, the false affidavit, the unauthorized medical changes. And then Sloan Voss's messages arrived. Time-stamped, location-tagged, explicit. Grant hadn't just lied, he documented his intent. By noon, a warrant was approved. Not for arrest, for seizure. Accounts, devices, records. By 3 o'clock, Grant Halstead's professional partners began distancing themselves. Statements released, meetings canceled, pending investigations. By evening, his firm placed him on indefinite leave. By midnight, his name was trending for all the wrong reasons. I didn't watch any of it. I stayed with my daughter, because the loudest justice happens quietly. The next morning, Grant tried to call me. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. It was short. No anger, no threats, just fear. "Hal," he said, voice unsteady, "we can still fix this." There it was, the moment he realized the story had moved on without him. I deleted the message. Some conversations don't deserve a reply. If you're still watching, ask yourself this. Would you answer that call? Tessa was transferred out of ICU 2 days later. The room changed. The air felt lighter. The nurses smiled differently. Recovery isn't dramatic. It's steady. Grant was charged a week after that. Not with everything, just enough. Fraud, false statements, reckless endangerment. The rest would come later. It always does. Marla asked me once if I felt satisfied. I told her the truth. "No," I said. "I feel finished." There's a difference. Grant lost his money first, then his reputation, then his leverage. But what he really lost, the thing he'll never get back, is control over the narrative. He doesn't get to explain himself anymore. The truth already did. Tessa moved back to Connecticut, slowly, carefully. We walk the garden together now. She laughs more than she used to. Some days, she still looks over her shoulder. That will fade. Trust takes longer. As for me, I went back to volunteering, back to folding chairs, back to quiet mornings. But I no longer pretend I'm harmless. Because here's the lesson most people learn too late. You don't need to destroy someone to stop them. You just need to remove their ability to keep lying. If this story made you uncomfortable, good. That discomfort is your instinct waking up. Subscribe, because the next time the warning might be for you. And if you think Grant deserved mercy, tell me why in the comments.